The Z sound, Z, is another difficult sound for Spanish speakers. This is because the sound in Spanish is different to that in English, and because there's no similar sound in Spanish. For example, we say zoo, not tho. It's a completely different sound, and of course the vowel sound is also different. What can also be confusing is that we often make the Z sound with the letter S in a word. So even though there may not be a letter Z in a word, there may still be a Z sound if there's an S. There's no immediate way to know, but you can go to the dictionary and have a look for the Z symbol in the phonetic alphabet, which represents the Z sound. Let's have a look at the pronunciation of Z or Z at the start of a word. Now note the letter itself can be pronounced two different ways. Z is normally used in the UK and Z in the USA, but it doesn't matter which one you pronounce. As with the V sound, it is important that you focus on the pronunciation in this lesson. Don't worry about how the word is written or its meaning. This is not important at the moment. For this reason, you will not see the word written in the subtitles because I want you to focus on the sound, and that sound is Z. So practice that sound several times and note that you should feel a vibration on the tip of your tongue and your throat as you are making the sound. You should also be expelling air. The sound is also vocalized, which means that you have to use your vocal cords to make it. Practice it again. Z. So let's practice with some words. Make sure not to pronounce a S or Spanish th sound. The Spanish th sound, like cerdo, doesn't exist in English. And the English S sound is not vocalized, which means that the sound comes only from the air that is expelled through the teeth. S. When I say it's not vocalized, I mean that we do not use our vocal cords to make the sound, the S sound. S. Z. Okay, once again, pause the video and practice each word using your speech-to-text recognition. Take note of the incorrect results you get and we'll review them later. So the first word is zebra or zebra. Zebra or zebra. You can pronounce this with a Z or a Z. Next we have zeal. Zeal. Zenith. Zenith. Zoo. Zoo. Zero. Zero. Zest. Zest. Zig. Zig. Zag. Zag. Zip. Zip. Zit. Zit. And finally, zone. Zone. There is a very strong Z sound to all these words. Now let's have a look at the words I was pronouncing with some possible incorrect results. For zebra, maybe you got thebra or zebra. Then you are clearly not making the Z sound. By the way, these incorrect results I am showing you are the most common incorrect results I got when I did this exercise with my students. Zeal can give you feel. Seal or steal if not pronounced correctly. Notice the difference between the z sound in zeal and the s sound in seal. Zenith may have given you send it or then it. This is because you're using your Spanish pronunciation. Zoo may have given you so, su, or soup. That's what my students got. For zero, they got sido and through. Now, here are the rest of the possible incorrect results you may have got. If you got all of these right, then well done. Either way, go back and practice them later to make sure you are fluent with this sound. It will take time, so be patient. You can move on to the rest of the lessons if you haven't got the sound right, but remember to come back to it. Now let's have a look at the Z sound in the middle of a word. Again, listen to the pronunciation and don't worry about what the word is. So pause the video after each word and repeat it in your speech-to-text recognition. Focus on the sound. Museum, museum. Thursday, Thursday. Business, business. President, president. Result, result. Reason, reason. Easy, easy. Now, let's see what those words were. Museum, Thursday, business, president, result, reason, easy. Now, if you don't make the z sound exactly with these words, it isn't so important, as it's not likely you will be misunderstood unless you make other pronunciation errors. However, many students have problems with the pronunciation of Thursday and Tuesday, and this can cause obvious problems, but we will take a look at that in a later lesson. They end up saying a mix of both days, like Thursday or something like that. Let's have a look at a few Z sounds at the end of a word. Now, the first three words here will give you incorrect results if you don't pronounce them correctly in your speech-to-text recognition. Try these words now. Knees, peas, fleas. Knees, peas, fleas. Try them in your speech-to-text recognition. For knees, you may have got niece, or nice, or ness. And for peas, maybe you got peace, or peace. They have the exact same pronunciation. Or maybe you got bees. For fleas, maybe you got please. Now, don't feel bad if you can't pronounce all of these, because they are difficult and they need some practice, a lot of practice. Let's have a look at some other words that will be much easier in your speech-to-text recognition, because they are not likely to be confused with other words. You really should be getting the correct results in your speech-to-text recognition with these. If not, then you need to spend more time practicing. They are choose, cheese, freeze, froze, realize, and specialize. Go and practice those words now. In plurals, the speech-to-text recognition tool will probably give you the correct word, even if you pronounce it with an S sound. This is because it can't confuse the words with another one in most examples. However, it is a Z sound in most plurals. Words ending in T, C, and K and F are common exceptions to this. Have a listen for the Z sound in these words. Cars, bars, phones, cities, fries, houses, computers, losses, bosses. These plurals are not pronounced with an S sound. Note the pronunciation sound houses, houses. We have two Z sounds here. But with bosses and losses, we have an S and a Z sound in the plural. Bosses, losses. Can you hear the difference between the S and the Z? When we use the possessive S, the Z sound is very clear, and the speech-to-text recognition should give you the correct result with these examples, even when you don't add the noun. So try these now. Sergio's, Martha's, Donald's, Berlin's, Roberto's, Madrid's, McDonald's, Brazil's. Note the strong Z sound in Brazil in English. Mexico's. If you get a result with the name plus is, is, Sergio is, for example, then it means that you are not pronouncing the Z sound correctly. You are adding an extra syllable instead of pronouncing the possessive sound. Here are some examples of the nouns that can go with these possessives. Try them in your speech-to-text recognition tool. But a correct result doesn't mean that you're pronouncing the Z sound correctly, because the speech-to-text recognition will autocorrect for the noun. However, if you are not getting the correct result, then you really need to spend more time on the sound before progressing. Now, let's have a look at some of these examples by adding the possessive noun. Rodrigo's guitar, Martha's keys, Donald's house, Berlin's nightlife, Roberto's girlfriend, Madrid's museums. Here we are just talking about the pronunciation of the possessive S, but in a later lesson we will be discussing its use. Using the possessive S correctly in English makes for excellent English. By the way, when a noun ends in S, the possessive S is normally written with just the apostrophe and without the extra S. However, it is grammatically correct to add the extra S. James's English course, for example. And finally, you should note that plural nouns have the same pronunciation as the noun in the possessive. For example, my boss's office, and I have two bosses. One other sound that can be confused is this and these. The first has the S sound, and the latter has a Z sound. Most students don't have a problem with this, but struggle with the plural these, and it sounds like they are pronouncing the singular rather than the plural. Go and practice these in your speech-to-text recognition now. This and these. That's it for the Z sound for the moment, but we will be returning to it later in the course when we discuss words such as business, lose, use, and abuse, which non-native speakers often have problems with. If you don't feel you have improved your Z sound just yet, then go back and practice some more. Listen to it carefully with some of the online tools I gave you, but try not to get frustrated with it.